Okay, so our voltage test, the timing on that at home didn't work out. The problem is I live right behind a big high school, and their band practices every day until after dark, except for Sunday, and it just didn't work out to do the test Sunday, so we're going to be doing it here today. But before we do that, I'm going to be installing this latch plate on here, which is probably the most important modification that you can do for one of these. Um, if you guys have been with me for a while, you'll know what I'm talking about, but this is mainly for the new subscribers. There's been quite a few of those lately. And we're also going to put in a Magnus Op seal. And we're just going to go over all that before we do the test. The reason a latch plate is so important, it's mainly when you start adding voltage and air and all this, but this little bit right in here, a whole lot of stuff goes on in here, and you want that solenoid lining up perfectly with that pin. And you see when I just pick the gun up and down that there's some slack in it. Well, what happens is over time this metal catch, it catches right in there on the polymer mag, and over time it'll eat away at that up, and the magazine sits lower and lower when it's in battery, and eventually it sits so low in there that when the solenoid strikes the valve back here, the BB comes out and it hits the bottom of your breech. And I've seen them so bad that when you go to remove the barrel's stuck, and I have broken threads off in the valve nut. So that's really why you want to run a latch plate. So the way I do this is I'll have the magazine in the frame with the solenoid cover off and the barrel tightened up, and I'll just wiggle it around, and that'll give me an idea of how high or low I want that latch plate on here, so the solenoid lines up with the valve. And then take a piece of electrical tape and cut it down and just strap it right on there where I think it needs to go. Drill my holes and I bolt it down, and then I check the alignment up there, make any adjustments if I need to. And we're also going to put a steel liner in this one and get rid of the old magazine clip. Another thing that the steel liner does is it swells the magazine and it gives you a tighter fit when it's in the well. Another quick tip: if it's a brand new magazine that's never been opened, what you want to do is tighten down these 3 screws. This one's got a nut on the end of it, but these have compression nuts that pull into the polymer, and usually from the factory they're not set very well at all. So now we have it all open, and we need to remove all these guts out of here so we don't lose anything, because what we're going to do is when we install this, it goes in here and actually goes up in the valve body a little bit, and we're just going to heat this part with a hair dryer. And what that does is when you go to install this, if you don't do that, there's a good chance that it's going to pinch this end and babies won't be able to pass through it very easily. So here's the tube installed, and it's nice and round down there. A couple of things when you put these back together to be aware of is, I'm not going to turn it over, but there is a nut on this other side. Some of them like to stay in there and some of them like to fall out. This one, it stayed in there. So don't lose that. And the other thing is, if you go to tighten it back down and you feel any resistance, take it back apart, because you're probably pinching this wire and you don't want to do that. So now we've got it installed, and as you can see where those screws go in, it's designed to move up or down in case you don't get it exactly where you want it for the first shot. I've seen people make these out of razor blades. I've made them out of various things in the past. And we're just gonna check our alignment. And everything's solid. Looks really good. Now, when we install the barrel seal on here, that's going to throw our alignment off, and I'll show you how we deal with that. To remove the barrel without completely disassembling the gun by desoldering the solenoid, what you need to do is unscrew this muzzle and insert a 4mm Allen wrench into the barrel and unscrew it counterclockwise. With the barrel out, this is how it goes back together. Your muzzle screws on there, and you've got these two shims. Every Blackbird I've ever seen has two of these in them. I've only seen one Bumblebee with one, but generally you don't see these shims in bumblebees. We're not really going to get into them a lot today, but they go on the other side of your frame. Your barrel screws into that, and the shims go on it, and then it threads into your barrel nut. So now we've got our Magnus Op seal in there, and as you screw your barrel back down, when it comes to the point where it stops screwing in anymore, it's gonna press the seal out just a little bit, and that's intentional because that gives you a better seal on the valve body. Now, because of the way this connection is designed, you've only got one hook. When this goes into battery, because there's only that one hook, what will happen is it twists it that way, and that throws your alignment out on the back side. So I'll show you what I do to prevent that and get everything lined back up. I get a couple of pieces of Gorilla Tape. I cut one a little bit narrower than the other one, and this one, the narrower one goes in first on this side up towards this portion of the frame. And the reason I do one thicker is because then I put the thicker one on there and you have a little bit of overlap. Now I've got my two pieces of tape in there, and they are going to push the valve body back in alignment with the solenoid, and it's going to give me an even tighter fit of the magazine and the magazine well. Now if you're doing this to a Bumblebee, the frame dimensions are slightly different on the Bumblebee frames. It might only take one thickness of this tape. And here it is, just trimmed off with a razor. Now we've got the barrel installed, and you can see how it is protruding slightly. Before you put your magazine in for a test fit, put some kind of lubrication on the valve body so it slides right up against that seal. I like to use chapstick. I found that works really well. So there it is. And we have alignment. If I hadn't put that tape in there, that would be twisted towards this way. And when you don't have proper alignment, this solenoid can strike on this valve seat on the outside of it, and that messes you up when you get into crazy rates of fire. And the other reason we did all this is because this setup with these Magnus Ops seals completely seals between the face of the valve body and the barrel. I've done lots of testing on these seals, and they're the only thing I know of out there that completely seals that. And the reason I know is because of doing comparison tests with completely sealed systems. And just before we put this all back together, I'll show you what it looks like with the solenoid at a factory setting, how much further you can go. So that distance between the collar and the frame is how much further you can go. Now, if you do adjust the solenoid to where it will go in completely just before the point that it bottoms out, and you do not up the voltage, that 9 volts really isn't going to be enough to open it all the way. So I think we're just going to leave this on the factory setting for right now and save that adjustment for a later day. So first we're going to do just double A's, and we're going to get our voltage on these. And we do that, I put them all in there, turn the gun on. 9.46 volts. Go ahead. Okay, that's good. Alright, now we're going to take out one of the double A's and replace it with a 14500 and get the voltage. $11.98. Now we're going to take out another double A and put one more of our 14500s in. .46, 14.45 volts. Yeah, I can tell that's a good bit louder. Alright. Alright, now we're going to use 3 14500s in this dummy plug. .21 volts. Go ahead. Now, which feels stronger, that or the higher voltage you just shot?
This.
Really? Because I shot this before you came in here, and I ran through the whole thing, and I thought that the 3 batteries were shooting harder than the higher voltage. Isn't that weird? Well, I wish we could see on the chronograph, but I shot it pretty good a while back. So we're going to have to figure out how to do some penetration tests with this, or just bite the bullet and get a new chronograph. Well, I found that really interesting that 3 of the 14500s seem to be stronger than mixing with double A's, and I messaged Sergey about it, and here's what he had to say. Cells have so-called internal resistance. It's a factor limiting the current. One cell that is not quite charged can reduce the current output of the whole battery. That's only a theory, of course. I guess there can be other reasons. But that's really what I think is going on. So I hope this helps you guys out who are still running the stock boards. And if you want to upgrade, I went up front just a second ago, and I'll show you what I got. I got a box full of fun. Now what these are is these are 8K auto pulse boards. I know they don't look like much, but I have them. I've only had one, and we were just running it through the paces to see how it worked, and it's been in this gun. And when I say auto pulse, what I'm talking about is when the rate of fire changes. See, we're on 8K now. Let me go ahead and show you all the rates of fire that we have. That's 1,000, 2,000, and 4,500, 5.5, 6, and it goes all the way to 8,000 rounds a minute. Now here's your pulse, and we've got it set at 2.5 when you go to 8,000. Now let's say we want to, well, let's just go back to 1, and we have a pulse of 7 there at 1. So as you change your fire rate, the pulse changes with it to an optimum value. So you don't have to mess around with it. All right, well, that's what's new on this end. We got them. Give us a holler. Later.